everyone, welcome to Briar Haus Writes. I'm Becky Parker. Today it is my honor to be able to have with us Dr. Mark Baumgartner. Mark is an associate professor of English and a director of the creative writing minor at East Tennessee State University in Johnson City, Tennessee. His work has been featured in numerous literary journals, including the Southern Review and Bellingham Review, as well as he has served as fiction editor for Mid-American Review, River Styx, and Witness. Excerpts from his first novel, Mariah Black, have appeared in Confrontation and Silk Road. In a third excerpt, The Great Siwa Shoe Award won the 2014 Fugue Prize in Short Fiction. Now, you have done so much, Mark. I just want to welcome you to our program. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Becky, for inviting me. So I've watched a few of your interviews and I always enjoy them a lot. So yeah, a little bit about me. So I am from the Midwest, actually. I live here in Appalachia, and I know some of the writers that you like Jesse and Denton Loving and Jesse Graves, Denton Loving, Jake Lawson, some of those. But unlike them, I'm not really a native to the area here. I grew up kind of a river rat in St. Louis, kind of in a floodplain adjacent to the suburbs. So very, very different kind of place. I moved here about 15 years ago when my kids were little because my family fell in love with the area out here. My wife's family are big hikers and they hike the whole Appalachian Trail. So it's kind of how we wound up here. But a little bit about me just as a writer. I mean, I grew up, I didn't realize I loved writing until I was older, actually. I'm kind of amazed I meet these writers who knew this was what they wanted to do when they were little. And that's always fascinating to me because I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was little. I was probably in college when I really got bit by the writing bug. Writing to me was always really difficult. It was the kind of thing I would sit down in front of the computer and I loved it. I really enjoyed it, but it was also the sort of thing like where it was a constant challenge sitting down and trying to put words into thought. And I oftentimes tell students this or tell folks who are interested in writing that sometimes the things you're passionate about are the things that are tough. You know, they're the things that you have to put the energy into and the time into. Um, yeah.
So when you finally decided, hey, I really enjoy this and I'm going to possibly make a living off of it, um, was there a certain day that you woke up and that's when you felt that I think I might actually want to do this more, or did it just kind of gradually happen to you?
Oh, great question. I think I was just taking all these classes and I realized, particularly in college, I'd been writing in high school and things like that. And I had friends who were really talented writers and were into this sort of stuff. But I realized all the energy of what I was doing was going into my writing. And I started out, I mean, I probably had four or five different majors, philosophy, biology. I thought I was going to be like pre-vet or pre-med or something.
Right.
And instead of studying for the tests, for that big bio exam or whatever, I was writing the story or reading poems for a class, for a workshop class, and I just realized like, oh, this is really what I want to do. So that was probably 19, 20, probably somewhere around there when I really started to kind of get serious about it.
And that's age 1920, not
Age
1920.
1920.
You are not a time traveler, Mark. I wish you were. I wish you were. So, Mark, when when you decided that, hey, I really want to do this, and then you actually became a professor, which is a very long, arduous road to get to that point. Um, how did you think, from being your perspective as a student, and now you're a professor, from your perspective in terms of writing, what do you think has changed about your writing, if any, from the time you started as a student to now as a professor?
Oh, I think I'm a lot more adventurous now, actually. I think like when I started out, I had like I think everybody when they start out, they have these preconceived notions about what it means to be a writer, who they're writing for, who their audience is. And I think as you get older, you get more comfortable in your own skin and just more excited about, the things that you want to do and the things that you're interested in, the places you want to write about, the kind of characters you want to write about. So that's definitely a big difference. I think I've read a lot more. I think having been an editor for so many years for journals, I think really kind of influences a lot of what I like to do. And having been a teacher, having teenagers, I do workshops at libraries with teens and stuff, and seeing what they're excited about kind of keeps me energized, and I think kind of informs a little bit sort of what I'm interested in. When I was younger, I was interested in all these old writers, and now as I get older, I find actually that I have a little bit more of an eye on some of the things that are happening in literature and some of the things that are happening just out there in the culture and stuff like that. So
Does that surprise you that you do have an eye for it?
I think so a little bit. I think I always had so much to write about just in my own head and from my own experiences and whatever. And as I get older, I think the reading portion of that, watching film, being an editor for literary journals, you see what other people are writing and what they're working on all the time. So that I think has really sort of informed a lot of the things I'm excited about.
You are currently an editor-in-chief of a magazine, but of Athlon, the Journal of Sport Literature. What has this experience been like for you, and why is this journal so important?
Yeah, I love being an editor. I think it's one of my favorite things about this job. I love teaching. I love the writing. I love being an editor. Those are the things that sort of that keep me going. So I actually just rotated off. I was editor in chief of Athlon for about 12 years, I think. And that journal goes all the way back to the 80s. Lyle Olson founded it here at ETSU. Well, actually at San Diego State, and then moved here to ETSU,
Mhm.
East Tennessee State, and brought the journal with him. And so we had a lot of faculty that have worked on it here over the years, but it's really an international journal. It started in the mid 80s, and now we have members in Iceland and England, and we have folks all over who come to the conference, who write for us, and do all those sorts of things. So I recently stepped down. I'm now on kind of the editorial board. It was after 12 years, it was time for somebody else to step in. But to answer your question, I think the journal is really important because it's one of the few journals out there that really is thinking about kind of the intersection between like sports and literature.
Mhm.
So it really is an academic journal. We publish papers, but we publish fiction, we publish poetry, we publish creative nonfiction. And it really is dedicated to kind of sports and writing. And I don't think there's really a lot out there. There's plenty of sport magazines out there. There's plenty of literary journals out there, but there really isn't too much that's dedicated just to those two things kind of together. And there's a lot to write about sports, and there's a lot to be said about it. I think sports it says a lot of interesting things about our culture. I think we can learn a lot about ourselves. As a writer, I think about things oftentimes as an athlete, going back to what I started with, writing being hard, how to
Mhm.
overcome hard stuff, having been an athlete. There's this illusion in the culture that the things we do should be easy. And I think that when you really do the work and you really put it in, it's my job to make it look easy. I think it's a writer's job, an artist's job, an actor's job, a comedian's job to make it look like it's off the cuff and it happens quickly. But um, as in sports, tons and tons of work goes into making things feel fluid and natural. And so really working on the journal really connected to just because I was an athlete and because I love to write. So it connected to me personally, but I think it also really made me aware of just so many interesting things about art and about our culture that I just wasn't aware of before.
Well, and speaking of writing, I would love to hear some of yours, and I know our readers and listeners would.
I've got a book coming out called Last Chance for a Slow Dance, and it's a collection of stories. And some of the stories are interrelated, others kind of not. There's some different characters that sort of appear. And I'm going to read a little piece that sort of features this bass player, Russell Fingers. And I'm going to read from a piece that takes its title from an old punk band that I love. This is called Small Parts, Isolated and Destroyed. It's a title of a No Means No song from a very long time ago. And this really all you need to know about this is that it takes place in Chicago. Russell's a bass player. He's fallen on hard times and in a fit of passion has decided to steal this classic and very valuable bass, like a large classical bass. And he knows he needs to get out of town, but this singer, Patsy, who's kind of the leader of the sort of alt country band, is going to prevail on him to come out and play a show. And he knows he needs to get out of town, but he's not going to do that. And I guess the only other thing you need to know is there are a couple of skinheads that he's kind of been playing in a punk band with, and they're going to pop up here in a little bit. They've got a little bit of a beef with him. So, all right, small parts isolated and destroyed. The L was filled with frost. Frost on the windows, frost on the eyelashes of Patsy standing next to me. She had on this stiff, shimmery skirt, and when she walked, her legs whispered such that you wanted to lean down and listen. We were heading west on the Green Line out of Chicago, and the train was packed with commuters heading home for the night. I was protective of the bass. I couldn't tear my eyes away. It looked ridiculous with my silly name in flash paint across the side. It looked like what it was, a grim attempt to hide the obvious. The case was mine. The bass was not. Patsy's eyes followed mine. "Why would you do that?" she asked, pointing at my name on the case. "A girl did it." She started to laugh, and I laughed, and she laughed more. "Oh, Russell," she said. "I bet it's a story, though." She meant the bass, not the girl, but the girl was a better story. "Oh, buddy," I said, "her name is Cecilia." "You named your bass Cecilia?" "Not even." Patsy knew it was stolen the moment she saw it in rehearsal. We'd played together before, so she knew my regular instrument. You couldn't miss it because of the fender sticker I'd stuck across a nasty gash in the purfling. She took one look at this new bass, glowing silver in the backlights like a relic in an old Teutonic minster, and with no wink, smile, or nudge, launched into a tale about a guy she knew back home who stole the only Shelby Mustang in town. The point of which being that I needed to get the hell out of town, hell out of Chicago, post haste. When I asked how far the guy got with the Mustang, she answered not very far and let it drop. I would have told her the story with gusto and only slight embellishment if she gave me a little sign. A meaningful glance, a slight adjustment of her tight white halter, just leaned in a little closer, anything. Since I'd agreed to play the gig, she'd given me nothing. She reapplied her glittery silver eyeliner, and then we were at our stop. Her band was a kind of alt-country hybrid: bass, guitar, drums, and Patsy. The guitar player knew 5 chords and played them in roughly the same order: verse, chorus, verse. He kept a board of effects pedals at his feet like the cockpit of a jetliner. The songs were easy to learn, straight time, no fakes or dodges. Not my thing really, but you could see they had a bright, glossy professionalism front to back. Patsy was the center. We dug a narrow groove around her, and the songs took shape from there. The set was cool and shapely and a little tepid. It was mostly the crowd, a ska band open, and by the looks of it, the kids filing in, some kitschy skinhead oi band was coming on after. Everyone stood at the back and stared. During the fast numbers, they swayed and rubbed at each other like dry sticks. Thursday night in an all-ages club show, heat, death, and entropy. These kids had seen everything and knew everything, and because they'd seen and knew everything, they were all the same. Crust punks and hipsters, skinheads and alternate chicks. It didn't matter. What I do requires difference in some basic sense. You have to have a gap across which to arc the current. Somewhere in the latter 1990s, the gaps went out of everything. I was thinking about this and not the song when I ran over a little. I added a false stop and a familiar punk riff to cover. "Mr. Russell Fingers and his fabulous silver machine," said Patsy. "Tilt it forward and let the blood run out, Russ." "Don't call me Russ," I said, leaning into the second vocal mic. There was an obligatory smattering of applause, and I gave a goofy bow as we went into the next song. I looked up and realized the place had pretty well filled. I'd played gigs here before. I recognized too many faces in the crowd, and they me. The bass was good, but it was only a bass. I kept trying to find that silver sound high up on the E string, but the songs wouldn't let me. I squirmed and vamped, but couldn't get there. I was having a bad case of bandit's remorse, and it made me tired and a little frightened. At least a high-end classical instrument is not a muscle car. These kids couldn't know they were looking at stolen merchandise. They didn't know jazz or the 3-door. Still, it was time to go. I leaned on the drummer for more speed. Speed was what was called for anyway, and I had the right instrument. Our last song was a swarm of twangy guitars, a hive of melody. It was pretty trite as written. During rehearsal, I rearranged it so the drums and bass dropped out at exactly the right moment. And then it was just a guitar and Patsy's high, reedy voice singing something about love and blindness. Not great, but it added some heft to an otherwise tuneless song. A modicum of drama, more than you have any right to expect for a $5 cover anyway. I was standing to the side admiring my handiwork when a full bottle of pop hit me on the side of the head. There were 5 skinheads at the back, 2 of whom I knew. The guitar player with his affected stare, and the drummer with the fake scar. Maybe I should have paid them the $100 like they asked. They hung back until after the loadout. We were walking to a friend's car, just me and Patsy. I had a warm beer in my hand, and I still had that pleasant chill that comes from playing a gig and stepping out into the cold night air. 5 skinheads fanned out behind us in a swaggering phalanx. They were young but mean-looking. We had a good lead on them. They wouldn't catch us before we were in the car and the doors were locked. Looking back, I'm not sure they wanted to catch us. The alley was dark and narrow. "Poser!" shouted one of the skinheads. Patsy's grip tightened on my arm. I liked the feel of her nails through my jacket. I've been called a poser, though, enough times, sometimes even with good cause. If you're not a poser at least a few times in your life, you must lead a pretty narrow provincial existence. These skinheads saw me play one kind of thing they liked and then another they didn't like. I had, in their eyes, violated some narrow category of trueness or authenticity. I do a lot of things and they aren't all good, but I do them in good faith and I don't apologize. Fix what's broken and move on. No refunds. Something in his voice irked me, though. Hipster, shouted the skinhead. I stopped walking. It was too much. I'm going, Russell. I will leave you here. No joke. Patsy was in the car now, looking up at me. I know these guys. I'll be fine. You're such a bass player. Geez, get the car. I'm fine. You're an idiot, she said. She squealed the tires a little as she pulled off. I leaned my bass against the chain link fence. It's a big instrument, but no good as a weapon. Believe me, I've tried. I pointed my beer at the three skinheads I didn't know. This is a professional dispute. Go stand over there. They smiled and stepped off a few paces, more curious than anything. They were just kids. I hope they weren't packing. So what is it? You're upset that I'm moonlighting with another band? Is that it? I said. A terrible band, said the drummer. Grade A terrible. A real shit sandwich. That last song with the chick singing and the guitar, and you standing there grinning like a ponce. He paused, looking around the alley for effect. That song made me want to kill you. There was no joke in his eyes or in his voice. That was why I'd hired him, after all. Most things are terrible, I said, but I do what's necessary. Sometimes it isn't enough, and I wind up in some alley answering to kids like you. In truth, it didn't seem so unreasonable to want to kill someone over a song. I envied them, their tribalism, their petty, narrow, self-righteous fury. There had to be a better explanation, some other way to account for myself. I stood there, head cocked, like a dog whose master's too far out of range. Here I am, I said. Here you are. Everything went white. I didn't see the punch. I was standing, and then I was on the ground, surrounded by a halo of spinning silver spheres. They rang and spun and rang. I was lying in a pool of them. It took me a second to piece it together. The skinhead had had a roll of quarters tucked in his fist, and they exploded with the impact. I laid there for a moment, unmoving. I squirmed when I saw their intention, but there was a jackboot on my back. There was a crunch and then another as the drummer put his foot through the bass, straight through to the ground. The sound was terrible. They ran back down the alley, and I tried to stand. I have a heavy right hand. I was going to hurt one of those bald-headed assholes worse than they'd ever been hurt before. But there was something wrong with the left side of my face, a broken connection. I sat down heavy. There were two holes in the base, straight through the material of the case, down to the pavement. I'll stop there. That's all right.
That will leave readers on the edge of their seat right at that spot. Good job. Mark, when you wrote this book, The Last Chance for a Slow Dance, there are 11 stories. How did you go to know from start to finish which story to put in this book? And one question I have is, are any of these stories true?
I grew up around music and I grew up going to shows, and my dad played music. He was a jazz musician when he was younger, and then eventually went into building houses as an architect and things like that. So I kind of grew up with it. My parents were music obsessed. But I was always terrible at music. I was never, I mean, I tried. I mean, I played the trombone. I played, I tried to learn how to play bass guitar myself, and
Mhm.
I could play a couple notes and things like that. But I just never had the skill for it. And so with the music stories anyway, a lot of those come from just my experience of just being a fan, like kind of a super fan, the kind of the guy who goes to all the record stores and has all the goes to all the shows. I keep all my ticket stubs. I'm kind of that
Oh,
guy. I grew up loving it. But everybody, a lot of people in my family are musically talented, and so it was a way for me to relate to them too, because they were musicians, and so I could tell them cool things about music or about the history of a song or something like that. And even now here in Johnson City, so many of my friends are just great musicians. Like just the region here, there's so many just musically talented folks. So I have to entertain people with witty stories about a hit single from 1983 or something like that in order to connect. But there's really a lot of stories about these characters. Like the piece that I just read there, there's some of those stories are collected in this collection, but there's a lot of other ones out there that some of which have been published, some of which I'm working on. So my hope is that I just kind of enjoy kind of writing with these characters. It takes me back to like being a kid and working on a train set or something like that, where you're just kind of working and enjoying the process of it. So maybe my next story collection will have some more pieces out of these characters' lives one way or another. None of them are really very autobiographical, I have to confess. There's the story, the first story in the collection is called The Great Sidewalk Shoe War, and there was a moment when I was a kid where all the shoes in the neighborhood went disappeared. So there's a kernel of truth in that story, but the actual thing that happened wasn't nearly as interesting as the story I wrote.
Actually
Okay.
was the one who won the 2014 Fugue Prize, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
obviously, people were interested very much in that shoe war.
It was fun. It was a fun story to write. So, and I like writing about being a kid. I don't get the opportunity to write too much in that mode these days. And it's interesting. I'm thinking a lot about being in Appalachia. Um, People write really well about place, and I grew up in the suburbs, and it took me a long time really to see the suburbs as a place, as like a legitimate place. I grew up in an area where there were 4 or 5 different house plans, and all the houses kind of looked the same. It was like if you went and stood in the street and spun around, you might not know which house was
Oh,
yours. All these houses built in the 60s, all of them built within a couple years of each other. They all had the same lamp in the
mhm.
front and the same lamp in the back that was on natural gas. And after a couple of years, after a rainstorm, they rusted and all the lamps just started falling down at the same at the same time in the neighborhood. And for many years, I didn't think of the suburbs. I didn't think of St. Louis, West County, St. Louis as a place, right? And then I moved to the South, and people were writing really well about place and these sorts of things, and it really caused me to rethink kind of how I thought about home and how I thought about how I was writing about those things. And so when I write about home, when I write about the natural world, I'm writing about the creek that was really a drainage ditch behind my house that we used to build a half pipe in. We used to get wood out of a dumpster, plywood, metal, whatever, and we would build a big ramp and we'd jump our bikes off of it. That's my nature.
I think that is so
It
cool.
was a
It's
lot of
from,
fun.
someone who grew up, in Appalachia, in Upper East Tennessee. It's so neat to be able to hear about an experience of someone who lived differently. For those who are listening, who are in the process of writing a book, but they can't quite figure out how to get it completed, how do you make your outline and know which story to place where to make it a cohesive piece?
For me, I always find that the writing comes first. And so I tend to think that when I worry too much about structure or worry about some of those later things, I get bogged down in the writing. So I always recommend for students just to write and write everything when I get asked this question. And I think that works. I know when I talk to fellow writers, I've gotten this same encouragement when I've asked this question, right? Is that sometimes you just have to give yourself permission to write things out of sequence. You have a writer like many writers. I think Nabalkov is one that I think of who just wrote whatever section of the story he was thinking about. And I can't do that. My brain doesn't work. My brain isn't that complicated. I can't hold that much in my head at once. But I can write ahead, right? If I'm stuck on something, and then I can look and kind of see the way that things sort of fit together. Some of these stories in this collection I thought of originally as a novel, but then realized that I liked them better apart. I liked them better as stories that were independent. I thought they fit better. I was able to kind of pick and choose sort of the episodes from these characters' lives that I thought were maybe most interesting to people. And I had written them as a thing that all went together, but they really found life as individual stories and individual pieces. And so, me maybe letting go of my, I don't know, expectations, or letting go of maybe some of the things that I thought that were necessary or needed, and instead just going with what the writing needed has helped me a lot over time.
Did you have someone, before you sent it to the publisher, did you have someone to assist you with proofing, editing? Did you have someone to listen to your stories and just to let you know any kind of critique?
Oh, so many people. I mean, I think that's part of being a writer. And whether you wind up going to school, and you've interviewed many writers who haven't gone to school, right? But one way or another, you find your people, you find a community, and those voices really matter because they help you to, even if they're not, I've found over the years, my friends who are writers and who read my work and have given me helpful feedback, sometimes it's not even telling me something that's wrong or something that they love, but like seeing what it was that they were excited about, like that first thing that, like when I ask somebody about a story or they're telling me about a story, the first thing that they fixate on or whatever, oftentimes I'm surprised by what they got out of it. And sometimes that's all I need for a little bit of inspiration to understand kind of what I'm doing and the logic of what I'm trying to accomplish.
Well, and when you talk about logic, I really love research in a story, because I am married to someone who always wants to point out the little um, part of that story that's not correct or appropriate to the time period. He's the one who always says, "Oh, did you see that in that movie? Let's rewind." And so, do you have someone in your life that can actually say, "Hey, that didn't really take place during 1960. It didn't happen, and the music didn't happen until 1972." Um, how important is that for that person to be able to speak in your life, or do you just wing it and write whatever you want and call it creative license?
A little bit of both. I always try to have some backup. I always try to show things to people at some point before they make it into. That way, I'm not getting things too wrong, right? And sometimes a lot. Like, I mean, I'm a huge fan of music, but at the same time, I'm not really a musician myself, and so I do need people to give me some feedback on little things. Not all the stories in this collection are about music, right? But that's just one, example. And so that is really important. My wife's a really wonderful editor, and she's helped me, with this book a lot. Sometimes just telling me that a line of dialogue doesn't make any sense or something like that. Sometimes it's the small things. But I'm like you. I love research. I mean, to me, the research is a really kind of a fun part of it. I find that I sometimes have to shut off my internet. Otherwise, I will sit there and I will research something really obscure for a really long period of time. I will go down the rabbit hole and I won't get the writing done for that afternoon. So sometimes I have to be careful.
When you are writing and you've started your book, and you're getting ready to be completed, for some people, if they really want that work to be done very quickly, they want, they want to move on to the next project. But realistically, Mark, how long does it usually take from the time you start the book until you send it to the publisher? What does that time period look like for you?
Well, this book has taken a really, really long time, just because it's kind of gone through these different forms, and I've just kind of been refining it and kind of really turning it into what I wanted it to be. What's always been helpful to me is that I'm always working on more than one thing. So this book has taken, gosh, in this form, I mean, it's been 7 or 8 years, but there's pieces of this that are 15 years old, 13 years old, certainly.
Mhm.
And so, kind of it finding its way into book form. This book is maybe a little bit more non-traditional in that sense, so it took kind of a long path. But I would say that along with that, though, I've been doing lots of other writing. Like, I'm working on a book about Las Vegas right now because I lived in Las Vegas for many years. It's kind of its working title is "When the Light Gets Into Your Heart," and it's the story about these kids who live in this high rise in Las Vegas that's kind of going bankrupt. I was kind of inspired by the 2008 market crash, though this book is set in a much more recent kind of time period. And so when I'm struggling, when I was trying to edit this book and trying to piece it together, when I would get frustrated, it was like, oh, I have this other thing I can go work on, right? I have this other piece that I'm excited about. So my advice to folks is, for me, this works is to always have more than one thing in process at any given time.
That way you're not frustrated and you just
Yeah,
keep moving, keep moving.
keep moving.
Well, Mark, where can we find your latest book, The Last Chance for a Slow Dance? And also, do you have any type of website?
Yeah, my website is MD Baumgartner, just my initials, Mark D, MD Baumgartner.wordpress.com. And so you can find me anytime there. Actually, let me make sure I got that right. Yeah, mdbaumgartner.wordpress.com. So you can always find me there. But the book is available on Amazon, on bookshop.org, Barnes and Noble, all those kind of places. It's on pre-sale right now. I was hoping to have the actual physical copy here that I could hold it up.
Yeah, no, it's like,
Hoping
but that won't
yeah,
be
it's like it's
until.
exciting to have it in hand. So, but it's on pre-sale. The actual hard copies I think are en route to me right now. So you can definitely find it if you just search my name and Last Chance for a Slow Dance on Amazon. It'll pop right up.
I recently interviewed an author who released one book, and like you say, he has another book coming out as well. So he's writing them boom, boom, boom. But one of the things that he finds difficult is promoting, because you're having to do so many tasks when you're a writer. It isn't just it's a lot of hard work to get it into people's hands. So what are you doing? Are you doing any kind of videos to promote, or how do you are you playing, like, to advertise your story? Can you pretend to play your bass? What are you doing to promote?
I need to come up with a good book trailer. I need to put some thought into this. So I'm going to be doing readings and some things like that. We're going to have a couple book events here on campus coming up. I'm hoping to maybe make it to some bookstores, maybe do some readings there. Um, I would maybe a couple interviews like this, those sorts of things. I love the editing. I love the writing. I love the teaching. The promotion is not the thing that's. I love talking about writing. I mean, I love sitting here talking to you and talking about these kind of things. But the promotion isn't the thing I wake up in the morning like super excited about.
It's the
So I
hardest
kind of
thing.
like my daughter has gotten really good with like digital media, and she's been making these little videos. And we have this cat who's very photogenic. I'm thinking we need to come up with a book trailer involving Shadow the cat in some way or another.
That would be so cool, and especially since you work at ETSU, I'm sure some of your students as well would love to be a part of any kind of promotional stuff that you've got going on. But Mark, we just wish you the absolute best from our perspective here at Briar House Writes. And everyone, please check out Mark's website and let's get that book in everybody's hands when it comes out. Thank you for being here,
Absolutely.
Mark.
Thank you, Becky. This has been a blast. I really appreciate you having me on.